be here. Thanks, Houston A Plus and Chevron for bringing us here this morning. I hope that this is worthwhile for all of us and that we all learn together and that there's something here in terms of either insights or strategies that you can use in your life, either personally or professionally. So my greatest passion is in helping enable a learning-oriented world. My greatest passion is to learn and to continue to improve and explore the world. And I get so much fulfillment from that I want other people to be able to feel that and to develop students to love learning and to be able to explore their passions and whatever challenges they might face in life, to be able to navigate them through learning how to navigate those challenges. And so the goal for this session is to advance our ability to foster motivated and effective lifelong learners, whether it is in children, in adults, or in ourselves. And so that's what we're going to be doing today. And we're going to be doing that by exploring this concept that Scott mentioned of the growth mindset, which is something that has grown a lot in popularity over the last 10 years since Carol published a book in 2006, and is something that is seemingly simple, but is actually very nuanced. So today we're going to unpack it a little bit more and explore some of those nuances. And then after the presentation, we'll engage in a discussion that I look forward to, Q&A. But we'll start this exploration of growth mindset by doing a quick reflection. I'm going to ask you to write something down very briefly. It can be in a piece of paper, in your computer, in your phone. So just if you can take something out that allows you to write something down, I would appreciate it. And what you're going to write down is briefly, in my own words, what does growth mindset mean? And if you've never heard of growth mindset, I want you to take a wild guess. What might it mean? 1 to 2 or 3 sentences, very briefly. The reason we ask this question is that often when we ask the question, we hear things like growth mindset is working hard, or is pursuing challenges, or having high expectations, or persevering, or being open-minded, or flexible. And a growth mindset is none of those things. A growth mindset is something very specific. A growth mindset is the understanding that we can develop our abilities or other human qualities. In other words, the understanding that we can change. And the reason that that's important is that when we think that growth mindset is working hard, for example, we might just only tell kids, for example, to work hard and encourage them to work hard. But if they have the understanding that abilities can't change, then they're hearing that, okay, I have to work hard and it'll take me longer, and it's going to be a drag, but I'm not going to get better at the process because, I'm bad at math, or I'm bad at talking to people or making presentations. So I just have to work hard and power through it, which is a different message than the one that we intend, which is you have to work hard to get better. So we have to be clear about how do we make that message clear that we can learn, we can improve, we can change, and these are ways to change. So when we try to change the behaviors directly without trying to figure out how do we also change the underlying belief, the view about the nature of human qualities and abilities, and having those statements about behaviors are not bad at all, they're just incomplete. We also have to somehow figure out how do we have them and us and other adults also learn that abilities can change and human qualities can change. Then our messages about behaviors are a lot more effective. And all the growth mindset research has been done on what's at the bottom here. And what it has shown is that leads to the behaviors at the top. But if we forget that step of working on the beliefs, then the behaviors are a lot harder to change. So what are kind of abilities? One ability that I'm kind of very intrigued by is chess. So the question is, are people kind of natural at chess, and some people can play great and others can't? So there's some people who can't learn how to play chess great? It seems like chess is something that involves a lot of cognition, a lot of intelligence, and so I'm intrigued by this question of, is chess something that anybody can learn? And even more than chess, I'm intrigued by blindfold chess. And in blindfold chess, the person is playing chess without looking at the board. the whole game. And so this person here is playing with the person behind him, and she might be saying, okay, bishop to d3, and he'll say rook to e7. And they play the whole game that way, and he keeps the whole board game, the whole game in his mind. And so I think it's an incredible skill. I feel like, wow, is this something that anybody could learn, right? And even more impressive, there are people who play blindfold chess with several games at a time. So the first player will say, we'll make a move, and the person who's not looking at the boards will make a move. The second person will make a move. The blindfold person will make a move. And then he'll play, in this case, 3 games of chess at the same time in parallel. And the grandmasters can play 12 or even 20 games of chess against masters who are really, really, really good chess players and beat most of them. And I just look at these people. Were they born in this planet or in another planet? It's incredible, right? So I just wonder, is this something that can be learned? Is this something that anybody could do? So luckily, there was somebody who went about trying to answer this question. His name was Laszlo Polgár, and he was born in Hungary. And during his undergrad years, he studied the biographies of 400 people who were considered by society to be geniuses. And what he realized is that all of them had started their domain at a very, very young age and had studied for a long time to develop the skills that they developed. And so he came to believe that any healthy newborn could be turned into a genius. So he wrote a book about it called Bring Up Genius, with his hypotheses that any healthy baby could be brought up to be a genius. And then after he wrote this book, he decided to go ahead and test this hypothesis. And the first thing that he needed for that experiment was a wife. So he courted a woman in another country, the Ukraine, by letter courtship. And he explained to her over letters what he wanted to do. He wanted to find a woman to marry, to have children, and bring them up to be geniuses. And Clara agreed. So she was a teacher. They both had kind of average IQs. They didn't have extraordinary IQs. And Clara moved to Budapest to marry Laszlo. And they had 3 daughters. So they decided that chess would be a great thing for them to become geniuses at, because there was a lot of fixed mindset in chess, but it was a particularly fixed mindset in chess in women, because there had never been a woman who had been a grandmaster before. All the grandmaster chess players were male. And so they said, okay, well, let's develop our 3 daughters to be great chess players. And they homeschooled them. They taught them different foreign languages. They taught them other things, but they also taught them to play chess really well. And in fact, all 3 daughters became really, really great at chess. So Susan, who was the oldest, became the first female grandmaster ever. And the criteria to become a grandmaster is the same for male or female. She was the first grandmaster female player. Sophia, who was the middle one, became an international master, which is a level just before grandmaster, between master and grandmaster. And Judith, who was the youngest, became the best one of the 3. She became the number 8 player in the world, male or female. She beat the best male players in the world, including Boris Spassky, Magnus Carlsen, who's the best player today, and Garry Kasparov, who's one of the best players of all time. And she was the number 1 female player for 25 straight years until she retired. Now, I am not recommending that you go home and try to replicate this experiment. And we might have moral and ethical questions about this experiment, but the results are powerful, right? And they show that people can develop their abilities to levels that we just usually don't think of. So more recently, there's been research that has shown this observation, that people can develop their abilities and become great at what they do. And one set of research studies has looked at the top performers in different domains where performance can be objectively measured, like chess or ballet or classical music. medicine, and certain sports. And what these research has been led by a person by the name of Anders Ericsson. And what they have found is that there were no early indicators when these people were children. Their IQ, was not extraordinary. It wouldn't have predicted their extraordinary performance. So there was nothing else that would have predicted their extraordinary performance. And what matters is, number one, the amount and quality of practice that they call deliberate practice. And they found that every single expert in these fields had worked for a very, very long time in a very deliberate way to develop their abilities. The only early indicator that they found was relevant was in sports, body weight and height. In certain sports, body weight and height were required to become top players in those fields. But in cognitive fields, there was no early indicator. The second most important predictor of expertise was sleep. The greatest experts in the fields slept more than other people. And that happened for a couple of reasons. So first, this deliberate practice involves full concentration. It doesn't involve multitasking or doing something while we're washing the dishes. It involves full concentration at a high level of challenge beyond what we can currently do, so it's uncomfortable. It's not in our comfort zone. It's uncomfortable, it's tiring, and the brain gets tired when we spend a lot of time doing deliberate practice. So these people need to rest, and they sleep more than other people. And the second reason is that when we sleep, we actually learn. We create new neural connections, we disconnect other connections, our brain actually changes as we sleep. And it also removes toxins that allow us to think clearly the next day and to be able to engage in practice at a deeper way. So sleep also was really important in developing expertise. And finally, more recently, we've developed this ability to look into the brain, to have imaging of the brain. And what this research has shown is that when we think, what happens is that neurons fire together. They connect with each other in networks of connections between neurons in the brain, and that's what allows us to think. And when we challenge ourselves with things that we don't know, when we struggle to learn something new, the brain actually changes and develops new connections between neurons. So those new connections actually change physically our brain, which allows us to actually think differently and think better. And so there's been research, for example, in London cab drivers. When people are about to become a taxi driver in London, you look at their brains, and they're just like the brains of anybody else. But in order to become a taxi driver in London, you have to study really hard all the streets in London, and you have to memorize 25,000 street names in a place that is not a grid. And the test to become a certified taxi driver involves you describing how to get from one place to another in the most effective way. And so it is an incredibly demanding task. And when they look at the brains of people who have studied and passed this test, their hippocampus is actually bigger than the hippocampus of other people, because the hippocampus is involved in retrieving memory and also in spatial thinking. So they actually change their brain and their brain physically to be able to do this incredible thing of going from this church to this school here, so you make a left here, right here, and in a city that's not a grid. Similarly, in animals, when you look at the animals at the brains of the animals that are in stimulating environments, like for example with other animals and with smells and toys that are stimulating and are engaging for them, those brains are heavier and denser than the brains of animals that are in boring environments where they're just sleeping all day and not doing much. Because again, as they're thinking and they're engaged and interacting with other animals and other physical objects, they're making new connections, and the brains are actually becoming denser and heavier. And that allows them to think better. So why this understanding of abilities is malleable? Why is it important, this growth mindset? So research has shown that a growth mindset leads to greater engagement, because when we understand that we can change, we're more motivated to change. So we might ask questions, we might ask for feedback, we might listen to the other points of view, to the other person's point of view more to figure out what can I learn from this. We might try new things. And so for example, in the classroom, that means students raising their hands and asking questions or doing their homework or challenging themselves rather than choosing to do the easy things. And as a result of that, they grow and improve more. The students or the adults, whoever has a growth mindset and is engaged in this learning process, we grow more And as a result of that, we are able to perform higher as well. The growth mindset also leads to higher resilience upon encountering challenges, which is a fact of life. We all encounter struggles and challenges. And when people in a fixed mindset encounter challenges, when we think we are the way we are and we can't change and we struggle, then we don't have a way out. We see like, I'm not able to go through this challenge, so we withdraw, we give up. People in a growth mindset understand that the challenge is an opportunity to learn and improve ourselves and figure out how to get through the challenge. And so we have higher resilience as a result of that. A growth mindset also has been shown to lead to greater equity and to reduce the achievement gap. Because while the growth mindset is beneficial for everybody, it's most beneficial for the people who face negative stereotypes. Like women in science and math, there's this negative stereotype that is not true, that women are not as capable as men in those fields, which is just not true. But when we develop a growth mindset, then the power of those stereotypes decreases. Same thing with people of color. Because they can achieve just as anybody else, but we have these unconscious biases in our brains, in everybody's brains, that become less powerful when we understand that everybody can change. And finally, a growth mindset leads to more positive and collaborative relationships, and we'll talk a little bit about why that is. So what is this? Why do we have all these benefits from a growth mindset? So the belief of human qualities or abilities as malleable leads us to behave in different ways, and that leads us to different results, like higher growth and higher performance. And when we look at the psychology of how this works through a lot of research studies, we find a couple of things. So first, people in a fixed mindset are most interested in looking smart or talented in front of other people. They want to prove them. They think, okay, there's either smart people or not smart people. I want to be in the smart people category, right? So that becomes their goal. And the way they go about doing that is doing things that they know how to do well, that they're comfortable with, that they're going to be told that they're smart. Versus people in a growth mindset can get bored if they're not being challenged. If they're just working on something they already know, they can be bored because they're interested in learning and improving. So we can actually see a student disengaged or unmotivated if they're in a growth mindset if we're not challenging them. So that's one of the reasons why it's important to challenge all students. People in a fixed mindset see effort as a negative thing, something that only people with low abilities need to put effort, people with high ability don't need to put effort. So when they have to put effort into something, they feel bad about themselves. They say, oh, I must be a person that is incapable, right? Versus people in a growth mindset see effort as something that's positive, something that anybody can benefit from, right? And they understand that the people who achieve the highest levels of expertise in their fields work really hard to develop that expertise. People in a fixed mindset avoid challenges versus seeking challenges in order to grow. When there's setbacks, people in a fixed mindset feel helpless versus people in a growth mindset are resilient. They see the challenge as an opportunity to grow and learn. When they're criticized and when we receive feedback, people in a fixed mindset take that as a personal attack, and so they act defensively. They might tell themselves, this person doesn't know what they're talking about, this is not true, or this person just wants to harm me, right? They have bad intentions. Versus people in a growth mindset, listen. They listen to what the other person's saying and ask themselves, is there some truth here I can learn from? When other people succeed, people in a fixed mindset see that as a threat, as something that makes them feel less capable, and they're usually comparing themselves to other people rather than to themselves. And people in a growth mindset view others' efforts as a lesson. You know, this person is so great at what they do, let me figure out what I can learn from them. Or as inspiration in terms of what we can achieve if we work hard to continue to improve ourselves. Now, those are kind of performance-related effects of growth mindset. There are also some like interpersonal relationships effects of growth mindset that are less well known. And so when there is wrongdoing, like for example, when we are at work and somebody's in a meeting and says something that puts us down, that is mean, for example, people in a fixed mindset attribute that wrongdoing to fixed traits in the other person. This person is evil, this person is whatever, in labels, and we don't see the other person as capable of changing, right? And versus in a growth mindset, we see that as a behavior that is a result of the other person's situations or current motivations, both of which can change. And so as a result, the reaction to that wrongdoing is different. People in a fixed mindset tend to retaliate, to engage in warfare. You know, I'm going to beat you up. And I see a lot of that with the political spectrum, right? We have this like views of the person in the other political party with all these fixed labels, and so we're not listening to each other and trying to influence each other. We just try to engage in warfare. Versus people in a growth mindset respond by trying to educating and engaging in a conversation and reach compromise, because they understand that both people can change and influence each other. And finally, when life gets really hard, people in a fixed mindset we see higher rates of depression because they don't see a way out of that challenge, versus people in a growth mindset are a lot more resilient to figure out a way out by changing the situation. So sometimes when we describe the growth mindset, then people's reaction might be, oh great, well, a growth mindset sounds good. Let's just have a growth mindset and ban a fixed mindset. We're not going to allow a fixed mindset anymore in the school or in the home. And in reality, it doesn't work like that. A fixed mindset is part of being human, and a very healthy and helpful step in the process of fostering growth mindsets is to become more acquainted with our own fixed mindsets and to understand what effect they have on us. So we need to recognize our fixed mindset, acknowledge that we're all a mixture, and we oscillate between growth mindset and fixed mindset. So we might have growth mindsets about certain things and fixed mindsets about other things, and they tend to be changing all the time based on our situations. But that reflection and self-awareness allows us to learn more about ourselves, learn more about mindset, and then be able to influence our own mindsets over time. So I'm going to ask you to think about a time when you were in a fixed mindset and what effect it had on you in a second, and share that with your neighbor. But first, I'll share that myself. So when I was growing up, say when I was in school, middle school, elementary school, high school, I used to look at other students' peers, and I noticed that some people seemed to be really great at interacting with other peers or with adults. They were so clever at saying things that were engaging or funny, and they were great at making friends and relating to people and being funny. And I thought that I was really bad at that, and they were great and I wasn't, and that was fixing people. It never crossed my mind that those social skills were things that one could learn and improve on. So I just thought that's how people were. And I didn't I wish that I could relate to other people. I actually wanted to be able to have engaging conversations and make connections with other people. But I couldn't do it. And so when I spoke with somebody else, my heart would start beating and my hands would get sweaty, and I couldn't think of anything to say, you know. And I didn't do anything about it because I didn't think I could change that. But it wasn't until I became an adult that I was talking to my friend Mike, who is really great at interacting with other people and being funny. And he said to me one day, you know, Ed, when I just did that, it didn't work at all. Next time, I'm going to try this different strategy in that situation. And I had a big aha moment. I was like, wow, Mike is so great at interacting with people because he thinks about what works, what doesn't work. He tries new things and learns from it and gets better over time. And he's been doing that his whole life, and I've never done that once. Wow. So from then on, I started observing Mike and seeing what he does and what was affecting, what was not effective. And I started trying and experimenting and reading books about interactions with people. And as a result of that, I've become a lot better over time. I still have a long way to go in any part of life. We all have a long way to go. But I've become a lot better. I mean, the idea that I'm a public speaker and I do this in front of lots of people now is incredible. Nobody would have thought that when I was growing up. So that was one of my experiences. I could tell other fixed mindsets about sports or other things, but I would love for you to take the opportunity to reflect on when was a time when you were in a fixed mindset and what effect did it have on you? And let's share that with the neighbors so that we can increase our own self-awareness and our understanding of mindset. Let's take 2 minutes to do that. So thanks for engaging in those conversations. They're often involve more vulnerability than in many other conversations. But through those conversations, we gain greater awareness of ourselves and of growth mindset, which is needed in order to change mindsets. And through those conversations, we also develop relationships with one another because we share more vulnerabilities, and we put ourselves in a position where we can support one another to change our mindsets and to support one another as learners. So I encourage you to continue those conversations and to open those conversations with people that you love or people at work. Sometimes fixed mindset becomes a faux pas you can't talk about, and it's actually helpful to be able to talk about it and share it with others so that you can support one another in changing it. Now, there's a couple of, for the rest of the session, we're going to be exploring the nuances of growth mindset. And some of the things that we see are sometimes confusions and misunderstandings that we think are helpful to clarify. And one of them that comes up is around potential. And a question that we often get is, does growth mindset mean that everybody has the same potential? Does growth mindset mean everybody has the same potential? And we would say, no, the growth mindset doesn't mean that anybody has the same potential. But it also doesn't mean that somebody has more potential than somebody else. We just don't know what anybody's potential is. We can't look at a person and say, you have X potential or Y potential, because we can't see. Potential is developed, it is fostered. As the CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, says, potential is nurtured, not predetermined. It's not like we're walking around with some fixed potential inside of us that we have to somehow unlock, but rather, if potential is something that we build, like potential energy in physics is something that can be built. So a growth mindset is not about some fixed potential, it's the belief that we can all improve. And there are lots of examples of people who were thought of by experts to have low potential, to never amount to anything, who went out to become the best in their fields. So when we look at a child and we see, you have low potential or you have fixed or high potential either way, but usually when, especially if we think that there's low potential, then we behave in ways that make that true, that are going to make that true. And so when we look at people, we have to think, we don't know what these people are capable of. We just have to give them the opportunity to grow and to challenge them and to support them. Another myth that we see is that a growth mindset is all we need. And there's so much excitement about growth mindset, and that is wonderful because we think that growth mindset is a foundation for learning, but a growth mindset is not a silver bullet. There's a lot of things that we need other than a growth mindset, right? So growth mindset is not sufficient. I would say that to make the most out of life, a growth mindset is necessary, but it's not sufficient. And so students or other people need other things. Like, for example, students need to meet their basic physiological needs, like physical and emotional safety, food, sleep, relationship with other people, love. When we don't have these things, it's more important for us to direct our attention to try to figure out how to meet these needs than to learn something else. And so it is a foundation that's really important for us to be able to develop in a healthy way, for our brain to develop in a healthy way, and for us to be able to pay attention to other things. Students also need the belief that what they're learning is interesting, relevant, or valuable to them, not to us. And often, like in schools, we have a lot of pressure to teach a lot of things, and we often teach it in ways that are not interesting or valuable to students. And when it's not interesting or valuable to them, it's on us to try to figure out how can we make it interesting or valuable to them, or how can we help them have more agency in figuring out what they're interested in and pursuing their passions and challenging themselves in ways that they want to be challenged. Students also need the sense that they belong in a learning community. So when they look around other students, they see learners, they see people, and also adults, they see people who love to learn, who love to value them, to challenge themselves, who love to solicit feedback and learn from other people and listen to other perspectives. And they also need to feel like they belong in that community. This is my place, I am like the people here, and we are all in this together. And finally, students also need good and ever-improving instruction. So it requires for us as educators or parents or community members to be in a growth mindset about ourselves, to continue to grow and to make that visible so that they see us as lifelong learners. And as lifelong learners, we can continue to improve our instruction or anything else that is needed for students to thrive. It is our responsibility to provide these. So a growth mindset is necessary, but not sufficient. A growth mindset is the beginning of learning, not the end of learning. Growth mindset puts people into a learning mode, so it enables learning to happen. Another myth that we see is that in a growth mindset, performance and results don't matter, that it's all about the process. And that if we're talking about performance or results, then we're not doing growth mindset. But that's not true. Performance and results matter. They matter in the real world, right? I mean, if I want to be a great doctor, it matters that I'm able to fix people's knees. Like, my ability to perform is relevant. If I am building bridges, it matters that the bridges don't fall down, right? And so actually developing competence and being able to perform is something that is useful in the world if we want to contribute to the world. And so actual growth matters. Sometimes when children are struggling and they're not growing, we might say, well, in a growth mindset, it's all about effort, so let's just praise the effort, and they're working hard, so that's great. But if they're working hard and not improving, there's an issue. Like, so if we're in a growth mindset, we have to figure out, I can become better at figuring out how to help this child grow. Or if I'm not growing, I can figure out, I can become better at figuring out what I need to try differently in order to grow. And the actual growth matters because a growth mindset shows that a growth mindset leads to higher growth. But if it's really a growth mindset, if it's something that we really believe that change can happen and that we can make it happen. There's also a way to think about this performance versus learning is what Scott was referring to earlier. Performance matters, right? It matters in the real world. And what happens in the real world with great performers, with expert performers, is that they oscillate between this performance zone where they're focused on performing, on doing the best they can, trying to minimize mistakes, and then going back to their learning zone where they're reflecting on how well they did, what they can learn, what they can do better, trying to practice things that they don't know, making lots of mistakes and learning from those mistakes. And so, say for example in sports, you might see an athlete like playing a game and trying to do their best and focusing on what they do well to try to win that game, and then going back, watching a video, trying to figure out where did I make mistakes, what could I do differently next time, using that information to go and into a session with a coach and saying, I didn't do well on my left-hand serve, so that's what I'm going to practice because that's what I don't know, if I haven't mastered yet. And these two different zones are very different. And it's helpful to be clear about when we are in each zone because they involve very different behaviors. Sometimes we mix them together, and so we might tell children that mistakes are good, for example, but sometimes mistakes are not good. And if we're not clear about why sometimes they're not good and sometimes they are good, they get confused. So in school, we want to spend most of our time in the learning zone, focused on what we don't know, and trying to challenge ourselves, which is going to involve mistakes, and we're going to learn from those mistakes in order to get better. So another myth that we see related to what we just talked about is that in a growth mindset, mistakes are always desirable. And sometimes we see these messages that, like for example, this is a place to make mistakes. And that's not a bad message, it's just an incomplete message because sometimes, again, we don't want kids to make mistakes, or we don't want a doctor who's doing a surgery to make a mistake when they're actually working on a patient's knee. So mistakes are not always desirable, and so getting a clear understanding and a deeper understanding of the different types of mistakes might be helpful. So let me share a couple thoughts on that. So the mistakes that we want to do in the learning zone, we call stretch mistakes. They're mistakes that we make because we're challenging ourselves with the things that we haven't mastered yet. We're trying to stretch ourselves, and so we make mistakes, and we're going to expect to make mistakes because we're doing things we haven't mastered yet. We're going to learn from those mistakes. So we want to be seeking stretch mistakes, not by trying to do things incorrectly, but by trying to do things that are challenging. The high stakes mistakes are the mistakes in some performance zones, right? Like if we are going to build a bridge, we don't want to make a mistake because the bridge will fall. Or if we are in charge of the safety in a nuclear power plant, we want somebody who knows how to do that well and they're not going to make a mistake because otherwise a lot of people might die, right? So the high stakes mistakes are the mistakes that we want to try to avoid because the consequences of those mistakes are very significant. Two other types of mistakes I want to share. One is the sloppy mistakes. The sloppy mistakes are when we do something, we make a mistake on something that we already know how to do and we're just being sloppy. And usually, we're not paying attention or being focused enough. And that is something we want to try to avoid, the sloppy mistakes. But of course, when we make them, it's an opportunity to learn, like any mistake, whether it's a high-stake mistake or stretch mistake or any other type of mistake. Any mistake is an opportunity to learn. But with the sloppy mistakes are not as desirable as the stretch mistakes, because the stretch mistakes are a much greater opportunity to learn. And finally, there's the aha moment mistakes, which is when we're trying to do something and we do it as we intended to do it, but then we realize that it was the wrong thing to do. Like, for example, if I see a student struggling and trying to figure something out, and I go to them and I say, oh, here's what you're doing wrong. This is it. I try to help them. And then they turn around and they say, you know, I was just struggling through this. I wanted to figure it out on my own. I really, really want help. You know, I meant to help them. I did what I tried to point out what they were doing wrong. I did what I meant to do, but then I realized that it was the wrong thing to do. And aha moment mistakes are really, really valuable. They're treasures of learning. So the aha moment mistakes and the stretch mistakes have the highest opportunity for learning. The sloppy mistakes and high-stakes mistakes are still good opportunities for learning, but they're mistakes that we want to try to avoid. But the best type of mistakes are the aha moment mistakes and the stretch mistakes. And for the aha moment mistakes, just being able to notice them in both cases and try to examine the mistakes and figure out, oh, what can I learn from this mistake, is the way to react to any type of mistake. And then the intentionality from low to high here means that the aha moment mistakes are very, very helpful, but we can't really plan for them. You know, they come as gifts that are unexpected. And the sloppy mistakes are also mistakes that we don't mean to do. Versus the stretch mistakes are things that we can be very intentional on. But if by challenging ourselves with things that we don't know, we are going to be making stretch mistakes, which are opportunities for learning. So what we can do is try to make stretch mistakes. That's what we need to focus on. And be able to notice when we make any other type of mistake, examine them and learn from them. And we need to try to make stretch mistakes, not by trying to do things incorrectly, but by trying to do things that are challenging. So, two other myths that I want to share. One is that to foster a growth mindset, simply praise the process, like praise hard work. In reality, praise is only a small part of growth mindset practice. So first of all, there are times when we shouldn't praise effort. So we shouldn't praise effort for students for working hard when they're not working hard. And this happens a lot. We learned that we should tell a person for working hard, and then we just praise them for working hard, but they're not working hard. So, okay, so this must be working hard, or I don't really need to work hard, right? And second, we also see teachers seeing students working hard and praising them for working hard when they're not actually making progress. But again, actual growth is important. And if they're working hard and not seeing results, if they continue doing what they're doing, they're going to continue to not see results. And so what's most important in that situation is to help them reflect on how they're going about learning, what strategies they're using, and what they can do differently. How they can approach this differently, and so that they can learn about the learning process as they're going through the process. So also, even praise for effort when students are working hard and making progress, too much of it can backfire. So exhorting students to work hard is a way to directly work on the behaviors without working on the underlying belief, right? It's like trying to change them working hard, but if they're in a fixed mindset and they don't think that abilities can be developed, then that's not going to get across. Also, we don't want praise to become an extrinsic reward, like a candy or a carrot. We don't want them to be working hard only because then we're going to praise them. Eventually, we want them to take more agency, right? And to work hard because they want to improve themselves, to do worthwhile things. And so praise is more important and helpful earlier in the process of developing agency, for them to see the value of effective hard work, experience growth, and then for them to be able to do this more and more over time. And over time, instead of praising the effort or the process, instead of praising, we can just talk with them. We can just ask them questions about what they're doing, why they're doing it, what thoughts they have, what they could do differently, and engage in conversations that lead them to reflect. And we can also share our process, what mistakes we're making, what we're learning from those mistakes, right? And just engage in conversations more as adults, not just giving them praise. So there's a lot more to growth mindset than praise. Some examples are we can learn and teach that abilities can be developed. That is what a growth mindset is. Abilities can be developed, or other human qualities. So we can learn that ourselves, like the science that I shared. For example, we can learn the neuroscience studies of brain plasticity. We can learn that. We can teach that. We can learn how top experts became top experts, and we can teach that. We can explore that with students. And we can embed it in everything we do and portray it. This, if we develop ourselves the understanding that abilities can change and that human qualities can change, then we start speaking in different ways. We become more engaged learners. We talk about what we're challenging ourselves with, what we want to learn and improve on. And that's all part of growth mindset practice. We can also learn and teach effective ways to develop abilities. What are learning strategies that are less effective than others? And that's something that we can always improve on throughout life, just like in anything else. And so I think schools could become places not only that teach academic skills like reading and math, or critical thinking skills, or those are all important things, but we can also learn about learning as we're learning those things. And we can explore what's most effective and how we can become more effective learners and self-managers as we go about learning. And finally, we can model lifelong learning ourselves and belonging to a learning community, making schools and homes and communities a place where people feel like they belong, and where communities that are comprised of learners who are challenging themselves to improve and to contribute more to the world. So finally, a growth mindset is just for children is something that we also get, It's like teachers feeling or parents feeling, there's a lot of research has been done on children, and so, okay, my children need a growth mindset. And it's not us that need a growth mindset, right? But a growth mindset is important for everybody to develop. And for children to develop a growth mindset, it's important for us to develop a growth mindset too, because otherwise they see us and they're gonna do as we do, not as we say. Our actions speak louder than our words. So students need to see us as a chief learner. We have more experience learning than they do. So we need to use our learning processes and our behaviors as an opportunity to teach them about learning and process, right? So as lifelong learners, we continuously improve in providing the other things that they need. We have to figure out, how do I improve my instruction? How do I improve my parenting? How do I improve my relationship with other people? And how do I better cultivate passion in my kids, or an understanding of self-management? And those are things that we can always get better at, and we can provide those other needs more effectively if we're engaged in lifelong learning ourselves. So a couple of key takeaways before we go into discussion. The goal, and what I think is, in my opinion, the highest goal of schools is to develop motivated and effective learners in young people and in adults, so that we become a learning-oriented world. Because today's world is very fast changing, it's changing all the time, and the opportunities for learning are endless. We have access to so much information, and YouTube and books and all kinds of things. This is a paradise for learners. The 2017 is a paradise for learners, and is a pit for non-learners. For non-learners, they struggle with constant change and constant struggle, but for learners, they thrive on them. And so it's important for us to continue to develop ourselves and our children as motivated and effective lifelong learners. A couple of key takeaways: growth mindset is nuanced. So it's hard to foster it if we're not clear on what it is. And often we have this vague idea that it is hard work or other things, but it's something very specific. It's the understanding that we can develop our qualities and abilities, that we can change. Growth mindset is not an excuse or a way to make kids feel good about lack of progress. Sometimes we use it that way. We see a student struggling, not making progress, and we say, that's okay, at least you're working hard, right? And that's not what a growth mindset is meant to be. A growth mindset actually leads to higher growth and performance, and it's important for us to figure out how to get there and how to improve at it. And finally, a growth mindset requires all of us to continue to grow every day, to make it visible, not just be learners, but make that visible to other people so that they can feel comfortable being learners in front of other people as well. And always improve what we can, anything that's needed for children to thrive. Couple of resources to foster growth mindsets. One, I'm happy to share these slides, and I'll share how you can request the slides in a second. As Scott mentioned, I've done 2 TEDx talks. One has been on growth mindset, the topic of today's talk, and the other one on learning zones versus performance zones, the topic of last night's talk, which we talked about today a little bit. If you want to learn more about that, both of these are 10-minute videos, and they're ways for you to share these ideas with other people. Perhaps bring it to other educators in your school and ask them, like, hey, I thought this was interesting. We could learn more about this. What do you think? Should we spend some professional development time learning more about growth mindset or learning and performance zones? We have a free newsletter at newsletter.mindsetworks.com that has a lot of stories and practices that educators use to foster growth mindset school cultures. That's most of the content there, but it has also articles about sports or homes or parenting. And we provide online and offline professional development, curricula, and tools to foster a growth mindset in children and in adults. And we partner with school districts to provide ongoing coaching and for school leaders or teachers to make this happen. So I love your feedback. If you could support my learning, I would love to hear what worked well for you and what I could improve on. You can just go to this URL and give me feedback. I would really appreciate it. And at the bottom of it, there's a check mark to request the slides. If you're interested in the slides, I'd be happy to send you a PDF. So thank you so much. I look forward to the discussion. Let's keep on learning.